Welcome back to another episode of Vintage Lunchbox Reviews, the show in which I review my vintage lunchboxes. It's right there in the title. On this episode, this is the first review I've done of a plastic lunchbox. Now, as many of you know, we had metal lunchboxes up until the early to mid 80s. A Rambo lunchbox is famously the last mass-produced metal lunchbox, and I have one up there, and we'll be looking at that later. But eventually, they stopped making metal lunchboxes and they transitioned over to plastic lunchboxes. Now, I'm not a fan, really, of plastic lunchboxes. I have to say that up front. But there are a lot of properties that you would only get when they move to plastic lunchboxes. So, there are things like Ghostbusters. There are things like, later laser tag, stuff like that just came out at a time when there were only plastic lunchboxes. And so if you like those brands and you wonder one, and plus if you were a kid, you didn't have a choice. There weren't, unless you were, have an old metal lunchbox that you still had hanging around. But lunchboxes were one of those things that were kind of like back to school clothes. Like you always got a new lunchbox when you were starting the school year. You had to have something new or whatever. And so anyway, they don't have as much character as you'll see because they don't have as much artwork on them. But they are part of my collection. I do prefer the metal lunchboxes, and I try to stick to the metal lunchboxes unless there's a plastic one that I just have to have. And this is one I just had to have. Along the same lines as yesterday's lunchbox, this is another Return of the Jedi lunchbox. Now, this one came out later, and maybe even in 1984. I'm not entirely sure, but it came out later than the metal lunchbox. Again, we've got on the back here, it's kind of embossed, and it may or may not, I'll try to tint that, but you can see that we've got the Thermos brand. But this actual mold was reused hundreds and hundreds of times. Every lunchbox from Thermos is going to look exactly like this, except for they may be in a different color, of course, and they're going to have different artwork. And maybe, I don't know if they all have white handles or not. We'll have to find that out as we go through these. But anyway, since this is the first plastic one that we've looked at, we will look at it a little bit more in depth than we do in the future. But as you can see, not too much different here. We have a clasp. Again, now we're moving into the plastic era, so we've got a plastic handle, which, to be honest with you, these all have stood the test of time. Every one of these still works. For my lunchboxes, where a lot of the metal ones rusted and locked up and don't work anymore. We've got the plastic handle that flips out, right? And then the way that these open, if you look, it's not half and half. It goes at a little bit of an angle. So when you open it up like that. So I guess it's so you can put deeper stuff here in the front. You get a little bit more storage in the base than in the top, which I suppose makes sense, but it gives it still enough, a body, like firmness, so the plastic's not going to snap. And then on the bottom here, we just have these interlocking hinges that, this lunchbox is 40 years old, roughly, and it still works. It still holds the test. It still holds up. As you can see, nothing really interesting inside this one, just kind of plain red plastic. So we won't look too much on the plastic ones in the future. We won't look too much at the plastic itself, but that's what these Thermos ones are going to look like. So we will real quickly take a look at the artwork. And so I feel like this might have been marketed to younger kids. Maybe the last Return of the Jedi lunchbox was one that would be for older kids. It would be metal. But also, you had the Luke Skywalker with the gun pulled out. You've got the Jabba the Hutt. You've got the skiff. So it's much more, I don't know, it just seems like, kind of teenage or a slightly older kid, like the action kind of stuff. Where this one is more, catering to the cutesy kind of crowd. We do have the Star Wars Return of the Jedi, but then, we've got the Ewok, and that almost looks like the, I'm not sure, but these look like the, one's from the cartoon almost, you know what I mean? It's definitely a drawing, but maybe it's from the Star Wars cartoons. I don't know, but oh, it is right there. It says well, it says Wicket. But yeah, this is definitely a more kid-friendly Return of the Jedi lunchbox. This is not one, like all your buddies on the bus are going to be super proud that you, you brought this one. They're not all impressed by that, but it is what it is, and it's a Star Wars one, so definitely had to own it. That's why I have it. So that's why it's up there on the shelf. So again, the ones where I cover plastic lunchboxes will tend to be a little bit shorter because there's not as much artwork to explore. There's not as much to, I mean, they're all the same except for the stickers. Now, if you're wondering, hey, could you just make your own sticker and put it on there? You can, and I have definitely made my own custom lunchbox, and when we get to that, I will show it to you. So yeah, and I used to just hide it on there, and people, when people would come in, I'd see if they noticed that it was different, because what I did was I just used the same template. I put the thermos name, and then I just put my own artwork, and nobody ever noticed. Nobody ever was like, hey, did you make that custom? Because it's from a cartoon series that you would think probably had a lunchbox. They just never did. So anyway, this is the plastic Return of the Jedi lunchbox. We will have some plastic ones in the future. Again, they're not my favorite, but if you're a collector, and especially if you're a Star Wars collector, this is the type of thing that you end up with. So anyway, that's it for this one. Tune in tomorrow to Vintage Lunchbox Reviews around lunchtime and find out what's on the lunch menu.